Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Gary Lane. Today, Israel pushing ahead with its biggest military operation in the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria in decades, taking out terrorists, including a top commander. This as Israel also sends a clear warning to Lebanon. Deal with Hezbollah or face potentially terrible consequences. And we'll hear how improving Israeli military intelligence is bringing them more success in their battles against their enemies. While the focus in the Middle East is on Israel's battles, Iran is also working on a different project, interfering in the U.S. presidential election, including using cyber hacks. And our Studio 5 look at the new movie Reagan, about Ronald Reagan's remarkable career. We'll bring you our interview with the star of the film, who plays the 40th president, Dennis Quaid, who calls Reagan, quote, a hero of mine. Those stories and more today on NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin in the Middle East, where the Israeli military is pushing ahead with its largest military operation in decades in the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. The Israeli Defense Forces taking out at least 5 terrorists, including a top leader. Amid the tense fighting, Israel's ambassador to the UN is warning Lebanon that it must deal with Hezbollah or face what he calls chaos and destruction. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us a story from Jerusalem.
The Israel Defense Forces say they found and destroyed a terrorist command center inside a mosque in the West Bank. IDF drone footage shows displays honoring dead terrorists and equipment to make bombs, as well as several explosive devices. This, as top Hamas official Khaled Mashal is calling for suicide attacks against Israelis. At the United Nations Security Council Wednesday, members renewed the mandate to maintain peacekeepers in southern Lebanon, but failing to specifically mention Hezbollah or condemn the terror group. Despite the UN mission, the peacekeepers have not taken action to stop Hezbollah from launching some 8,000 missiles and drones into Israel the last 10 months. The U.S. representative at the UN said none of the nations present would put up with what Israel has had to endure.
No member of this council, facing a brutal terrorist organization on its border, would tolerate daily attacks and displacement of tens of thousands of its own people.
Since the UN forces are not stopping Hezbollah, Israel warned Lebanon that it must do the job itself.
I have a message for the Lebanese people. You and your government have a choice to make. Confront Hezbollah today, or watch as your country is dragged into chaos and destruction.
More than 60,000 Israelis are displaced from their homes in the north, forced to flee Hezbollah's almost daily attacks.
When will it be the end of the story? Only when we can bring back security and the residents to their homes safely.
Meanwhile, in Gaza, Israel says it recovered the body of a soldier killed on October 7th and held by Hamas. Some 300 vehicles with families and friends of hostages drove from Tel Aviv to Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the hardest-hit communities, on October 7th. Some ran past the security fence to get closer to Gaza, and others called out to their loved ones in captivity.
I need you to know that I am giving you now the blessing I give you every single morning when I pray for you, and every Friday night. May God bless you and keep you. May God shine his face upon you and be gracious to you.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Although a broader Middle East war between Israel and Iran seems to have been averted, at least for now, the IDF is on the move with their major counterterrorism operation in northern Samaria and the rescue of an Israeli Arab hostage from a Hamas tunnel. Jewish News Syndicate Jerusalem Bureau Chief Alex Traiman, appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, says better intelligence is bringing about greater success for the IDF.
There's been constant operations really since October 7th and even before in the West Bank, which is known in Israel as Judea and Samaria, particularly in the northern Samarian areas of Tokaram and Jenin, and also the Palestinian town of Farah. The reason why we haven't seen all-out war between forces in Judea and Samaria and Israel is because Israel has been going in with significant intelligence and hyper-focusing military activities on specific terror groups, small groups, as they arise.
Well, many people around the world were elated to see hostage Farhan al-Qadi rescued from that Gaza tunnel. What have we learned about that rescue, and how is he doing?
Well, first of all, he was rescued from an area in southern Gaza. It was an area that the United States didn't want Israel to be operating in to begin with. But the lesson here is that as the war goes on, Israel's intelligence gets much, much stronger, both from the individuals that they've arrested inside Gaza that are providing significant intelligence. They understand the mapping of the elaborate Hamas tunnel network to a much greater degree, the ways in which they go into the tunnel. To reduce deaths to Israeli soldiers, to reduce conflict inside the tunnels, has made these operations more successful. And I do believe that they will be more frequent as the war continues to go on. Farhan al-Qadi, a 52-year-old Bedouin, he's not Jewish, a Muslim hostage, was recovered by Israel. And though he was malnourished and weak, he was in generally good condition and was returned home to a happy family.
Well, that's wonderful. We're all happy to see that. Egypt and Qatar are still pursuing negotiations for a possible Gaza ceasefire and hostage release. I guess an Israeli delegation is now in Doha. What's holding up an agreement there?
Well, I understand that the Israeli delegation is actually back home in Israel. Hamas didn't send direct representatives to the negotiations. They're negotiating through their interlocutors in Qatar and Egypt. Qatar has been hosting the senior leadership of Hamas in their country for many years, including Khalid Mashal and Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in an Israeli assassination in Tehran just several weeks back. Egypt also, which was believed for many years to be a mediator between Israel and Hamas. These tunnels have been uncovered, especially along the border, the Philadelphia corridor, going from Gaza into Egypt. One major tunnel, which was wide enough for 2 trucks to go through, passed directly under an Egyptian army base. So it's become very clear to Israel that Egypt has actually been working with Hamas and hasn't been a neutral mediator between the parties. It's not clear that there's going to be a hostage release anytime soon, despite the wishes from the United States and from many in Israel that would happen.
On Israel's northern front with Lebanon, we saw many rockets, about 300 fired in one day at Israel. Earlier this week, Chuck Holton did a story talking about $300 million U.S. taxpayer dollars annually going to the Lebanese army, and some of it ending up in the hands of the Hezbollah terror group. So what have you learned about that?
Well, yes, there's been a lot of money going into Lebanon and much money that's been going to Iran from the United States and a foreign policy which is, basically allowed Iran to bypass sanctions, reduce sanctions against Iran. All this money gets funded to the terror proxies, including Hezbollah. Any money that goes into Lebanon is going to end up in the hands of Hezbollah, and they've just used this money to build a terror arsenal, a weapons arsenal against the state of Israel. Hezbollah has over 150,000 to 200,000 missiles and rockets pointed at Israel. Many of them are long-range rockets. Several of them are precision-guided, could hit strategic targets deep inside Israel, inflict significant damage. But as we saw on Sunday morning, when they prepared a massive barrage against Israel, Israel acted preemptively, striking just moments before a 5 a.m. Scheduled barrage from Hezbollah and removing between 50 and 60% of the threat, using 100 aircraft to take out thousands of terror targets, which not only saved Israelis on Sunday morning itself, but have prevented many future attacks against the state of Israel.
Finally, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei has expressed openness about re-engaging with the United States on its nuclear program. So what do you think? Is that a good idea, bad idea to enter talks with Iran on the development of their nukes?
It's a terrible idea. Iran has been developing an illegal nuclear weapons program for years. At the same time, you see the malign activity all across the Middle East, destabilizing Iraq, destabilizing Syria, destabilizing Lebanon, destabilizing Yemen, destabilizing Gaza and parts of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank as well. And this is the war that started on October 7th, this is what's happening with an emboldened Iran before they get nuclear weapons. If Iran will cross that threshold and become a nuclear power with a nuclear umbrella, creating a deterrence against the United States, against Israel, against European powers, there's no telling how much belligerent activity and damage they can cause in the Middle East.
Okay, Alex Traiman, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time and your insights. Stay safe.
Thank you, Gary.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, The Dragon's Prophecy. Author Jonathan Cahn explains what the Bible says about current events in the Middle East. And a look at Mark Zuckerberg's latest admissions about censorship on Facebook and Instagram. You can see it all on The Global Lane tonight on the CBN News Channel at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Coming up, while Israel's battles against its enemies remain the focus in the Middle East, Iran is actively interfering in the U.S. presidential election. We'll take a look at what they're up to when we come back.
Hi, I'm Charlene Aaron. At CBN, we're here to pray for you all year long. But did you know that each fall, the entire staff of CBN sets aside a very special time to pray especially for you? We have seen tremendous miracles happen as a result of these prayers. Please call or send in your prayer requests today. No matter how big or small your need is, we consider it a great honor and privilege to pray for you.
Tech experts warn Iran is actively interfering in the U.S. presidential election, targeting both campaigns with cyber hacks. And they say we can expect more international meddling in the days ahead. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has that story.
The FBI describes Iran's activity as increasingly aggressive during this election cycle, and former intelligence official Michael Pregent tells CBN News that's likely because the Islamic regime believes a win by Kamala Harris is in its best interest.
I just think our adversaries are not really worried about this administration, but they are hearing tough language from the Trump campaign. So I would think that our adversaries will continue to push disinformation and misinformation into our social media.
Microsoft first reported news of this targeted hacking against the Trump campaign and announced their techs have also uncovered election interference attempts from Russia and China.
We should get to a place where our adversaries fear a Democrat president and a Republican president, but now they tend to pick the racehorse.
House Intelligence Chairman Congressman Mike Turner recently blasted the Biden administration for failing to hold Iran responsible for multiple acts.
The administration is both on the hacking side, on the misinformation side, and on the alleged attempt on Donald Trump's life is not holding Iran accountable. There's no red line.
Turner says the administration's silence only emboldens Iran to increase its efforts.
There is not a response that impacts Iran or that has a deterrent effect or holds them accountable. And that, of course, results in increased activity and increased emboldening of Iran to meddle in our elections and to I think, have people at risk in our country.
National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby counters the administration has repeatedly raised concern over Iranian cyber attacks, adding that these recent attempts are nothing new for the regime. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Still ahead, our CBN Studio 5 look at the new movie Reagan, about the life and career of the 40th president. Ephraim Graham sits down with the star of the film, Dennis Quaid, who talks about what it was like to portray someone that he calls a hero of mine. We'll bring you the story right after this. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Ronald Reagan's real life is bigger and better than any story he shared on screen as an actor in the early days of his career. Actor Dennis Quaid brings a story to us about a big screen biopic that hits the theaters tomorrow. Quaid calls the role his absolute favorite. He sits down with our Ephraim Graham for an exclusive look at the long-awaited release.
Oh, Lord, what a heavenly light.
From astronaut Gordon Cooper in The Right Stuff.
To rock and roll singer Jerry Lee Lewis in Great Balls of Fire.
Do you believe in friendship, Wyatt Earp?
To dentist, gambler, and gunfighter Doc Holliday in Wyatt Earp. Dennis Quaid has built a career bringing real big lives to the big screen. His latest?
I will be frank with you that as a citizen, I would not like to see any political party outlawed on the basis of its ideology.
America's 40th president in the long-awaited film Reagan.
Because I still believe, Mr. Chairman, that democracy can handle it.
You've been busy, but now you get to play Reagan. What does this role mean to you?
It's become my favorite role I've ever had, actually.
Wow.
Reagan was a hero of mine. I voted for him twice, and he was like everybody's dad. He was a real heavyweight, and he won the Cold War. It really meant a lot to me in my life, for all of us of that generation, and for the generations today. And playing him was the challenge of my life.
Challenge? What was the hardest part?
The biggest challenge of playing Reagan was getting down to him as a person, you know, not the hero that he was to me and so many people. And that's kind of warts and all, you know, because that's who we are. There was a place in Reagan, in talking to people who really knew him and were close to him, that was very private, that was impenetrable. This is the great communicator we're talking about. And what was that all about? That's what makes people tick, down at their core. That was where I wanted to get to. Like I said, I didn't want to do an impersonation, and fear went up my spine, because Reagan was like Muhammad Ali. Everybody knows him.
I am about to start the biggest war of this century, and I'm not going to fire a single shot.
You're going to blow up 8 years of diplomacy. Well, if you think that got their undies in a wad, you just wait.
Knowing what you know now, having played the role, how would you compare the Reagan family to the Quaid family?
We were similar in many ways. I didn't see myself as Reagan. I didn't think I looked like him. We both have sunny dispositions, and I think down at the bottom of things. And he was an actor.
Tell me about finding the voice, because Reagan had such a distinctive voice, and I can imagine that had to have been weighing on your mind.
Yeah, well, that and the way he walked. And I was lucky because they got the part, they offered me the part in 2018. We didn't start shooting until COVID in 2020. Great time to make a movie. I basically talked like that for a year.
Really?
to the my family's, you know, they had to put up with it, I guess. In earlier life, he had you know, his voice was very much higher. It was way up here, you know, and it wasn't until about the time that he was president that, you know, he comes down to where you slow down and you talk slower.
I call upon the scientific community, those who gave us nuclear weapons, to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace.
You, in this story, explore more of his faith than people are probably used to seeing.
Well, it's because it was such a huge part of his life. It was an everyday part of his life, you know, starting from as a young boy. You know, he even made the decision on his own to be baptized at that time.
There's a purpose for your life.
You can run from a bully for so long, but after a while, you're going to have to stand up to him. It's my boy!
His mother was his rock. That's another way that we're very similar. And he had an alcoholic father, which is kind of similar. That does something to a person, and you need a rock. And he found that early on.
This is also a love story.
Yes, it is.
Hello, I'm Nancy Davis.
Hello, Nancy Davis. I'm Ron Reagan. What would you have me do?
I want you to fight!
At the core of our movie is the love story between he and Nancy, which was very real and very rare. He wrote her love letters like every day, a little note or whatever, you know, even when he was in the hospital after the assassination attempt, actually. And I don't think there would have been a President Reagan if it it wasn't for Nancy.
Ronnie, remember when we met? You told me that you wanted to make a difference in this world. You know what you have to do.
How are you feeling now that the movie is finally coming out? Because many people probably thought this was released, because I remember when we did the big splash and spread. It's
it's been going on from, well, I think it was a lot of tension, just with it getting made. And the only thing that I really insisted upon is that it not come out during an election year.
You got your wish.
And because I thought, I didn't want this to be perceived politically, and it's not a political movie at all. But then again, like, interest is very high in Reagan, and the times we were living in, especially 78, 79, 80, are so similar to 21, 22, 3, and 4, actually. And so I have to say, well, what do I know?
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Nashville, Tennessee.
Reagan hits theaters nationwide starting this Friday. Coming up, an unusual way for college students to study senior citizens by living with them. We'll have that story for you when we come back.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Students from Quinnipiac University School of Health Sciences are living in a retirement community as part of their studies. Grace Maselli and Leah Shaman moved in with 500 older adults at Masonacare's Ashlar Village in Connecticut. It's part of the university's Students in Residence program. It places undergraduate or graduate candidates in the assisted living community for an academic year. Students learn from their senior neighbors and help them with activities and technology, including how to use their phones, all while continuing their studies on campus. The program, which began in 2016, hopes to bridge the gap between generations. Well, that's it for today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.